striving and achieving a position in behavioral health leadership as a Black woman is no easy feat. One might wonder what were the costs? What happens when an environment does not uplift and empower all the intersectional identities of Black women? So, what happens when the amazing gift of experience and talent of Black women are not seen? Then, on the flip side, what happens when visibility is placed on Black women? Therefore, what does it mean to bring identity in the workplace? Welcome to People of Color in Psychology, the show that explores mental health topics specific to culture, diversity, and communities of color. I am your host, Jack Sen. As part of our series for Black History Month, our guest today is Samantha Edu, a Georgia-based licensed professional counselor with a master's degree in mental health counseling. She has been practicing in the field of mental health for the last 15 years in multiple arenas, but her specialty areas include cognitive behavioral therapy, grief counseling, mother and daughter relational counseling, clinical supervision, and the health and wellness of Black women, all within a culturally responsive and inclusive care model. Out of her love for writing and relationship with her father that passed away during her childhood, she birthed Alexis Lynn Publishing, in which she has created a line of wellness journals and various products that celebrate wellness and uplift the familial bond of Black families. As part of our episode today, as a Black licensed professional counselor, Samantha will be discussing inclusive leadership, bringing identity in the workplace, and keeping track of your accomplishments as part of your ongoing self-reflection journey, and to recognize the importance of the gifts you bring to organizations in which you work with. Samantha, thank you so much for being on our show today.
Thank you for the invitation.
Well, you've done quite a bit, and your story, resilience is amazing. And so, why don't we start off with you telling us a little bit about how you got into this work? Share with me any memorable events.
I didn't start out with a really clear path or reason why I wanted to go into the field of mental health. I think growing up in a really small town, we did not talk about mental health. I don't know that I even knew what a psychiatrist might have been when I was in high school. I just knew when they started asking about, well, what did you want to major in? I said psychology because I knew that that degree allowed me to get to know more about the brain and how people thought and why they thought about things the way that they did. And I wanted to know more about that. And so at the time, I didn't know that that would lead me to where I am today. But I knew, I would pick up bits and pieces along the way, which is kind of how I live. But there were some key milestones that confirmed for me along the way that I was always where I'm supposed to be, and that usually that is how it works to this day. Some of those milestones, as mentioned earlier, my father passed when I was 15, and although I wasn't thinking about being a therapist, but the more I started to learn about mental health and how that really does impact a young mind, as mine was, and also what that meant for generations that would not have him the way that I did for those 15 years, and the impact on our family. The older I got, the more I learned about the impact of a loss like that one. And that one, sent me into a direction of wanting to know more about grief counseling, and that led to the grief certification. And more life moments started to unfold. And I think I started writing about like lollipop moments, and I've shared this in some of my clinical supervision groups, is that lollipop moments happen all around us where it's just like these little moments that pop up, and if we're not paying attention they will sort of go right past us. But I had a moment where I had my first child when I was young, and I was receiving government assistance, and in one of the programs, we were a group of us were in there together, and it was young Black women in this program together. And I was still in school this whole time. I was getting my bachelor's degree online, and to see how people treated us in this program, just had this idea of who we were without even asking anything about our identities and where we come from, what we thought, how we were feeling. None of those things came to any parts of the conversation. So we had to do these classes in order to get a check every week. And so I did the classes because I needed the check. And one time I had to write a paper as a part of the class, and I just turned it in, and one of the ladies came to me and was like, "What are you doing here? When did you stop seeing yourself? Like, when did," and I was like, "Whoa, what is happening?" And it was just, why it's still powerful to this day to think about what it felt like to be seen that day. Like, I don't even think in that moment that I started to realize how invisible I had become to myself.
Wow.
And so that created this huge lollipop moment for me. It was monumental, where I knew that I needed to be able to create space for myself where I could see people and just remind them, when you start being invisible to yourself, that wait a minute, when did you stop seeing yourself? There was a time where you saw you in the mirror, and there was a you wanted to be, and you stopped seeing that. What happened? And that was monumental, and it just led me into Black women's mental health specialty, and and just keep it to move into my master's degree. It's just these moments just kept me pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing, and those moments just kept happening, and I'm here now.
Wow. Courage, resilience, and to access the vulnerability that you had to go through to face that. Did you have a sense of, I guess, what happened that led to you just becoming invisible? And then, of course, on the flip side, what were some of the things that helped you get out of that so you could start seeing yourself? Obviously, the example that you gave, starting with that class and the essay. And then what were some other things that followed after?
When you think about today's systems that are set up, and they're supposed to be set up to help you, they're not necessarily set up to empower you as you navigate the system. And so the more that I was, having to navigate America's, welfare system and government systems to seek assistance, and also just trying to be a new mom. I had moved to Georgia and left my family. And so I'm navigating all this. I left the safety of my identity and trying to create something new with a new identity attached to me. And also just this huge responsibility of the generation I was creating inside of me. It all started to jumble into the thoughts of, whoa, you know, I'm definitely not good enough to be doing any of this. And you start hearing the unspoken words around you, or the fact that you have to go and ask or do all of this to get a $200 check a week while you work a full-time job, and none of it is enough. So the messages that our system send to people that really do need help, they become the voices, even if those voices never existed before. We don't have systems that were created to build up people that need help. And so we have to be those people.
And thinking about correcting the system, giving
Hmm.
voice and empowerment, and tying it
Absolutely.
back to identity, how can we create that so that we don't perpetuate this existing system of
Hmm.
making people invisible?
We have to be brave enough to have conversations like this one. And then we have to be brave enough to challenge the system and call out, things that are deeply rooted within our everyday life. It is the smallest things, you know. One of the things that we have been doing with at work is in our trainings is introducing the idea of CAF and how deeply rooted those systems just it just flows underneath everything that we do every single day. And if you consider that we all have a part to play and we actually all do contribute to these systems in some way, whether we are intentionally doing it or not, that means we can all collectively change that system. But we have to keep having these conversations. We have to keep being active. We can't just have a conversation, right? Saying, oh, I'm okay with being uncomfortable. That's not enough. You can't just be uncomfortable. You actually have to be uncomfortable and do something, which means you have to have some compassionate action. And then, as the person feeling that way, I needed to tell people I'm feeling this way. You know, I had a whole family. I had a whole support system, beautiful support system. I just wasn't telling them that I was feeling invisible, or they just didn't know. And that's because I come from a group of beautiful, strong Black people, and one of the downfalls of coming from a group of beautiful, strong Black people is you think you got to be strong all the time. And, you know, resilience is amazing, but resilience is also a weapon you use against yourself to shield you. And that also increases your invisibility.
Hmm. Hmm. Gosh, there's so much to be said about everything you've shared. The uh, just I mean, recognizing that we need to keep having these conversations, and that isn't enough, that we must take it into action. And of course, what does action
Yeah.
look like? There's also the part of we ourselves needing to take the risk. Now, this is something that has been discussed quite often, which is, as people of color, especially Black women,
Mm-hmm.
if Black women are to speak up, right, and
Mm-hmm.
challenge the status quo, there are consequences. And
Absolutely.
so it's I can't help and myself feel this tension that
Mm-hmm.
folks have to continuously navigate, and that just puts a lot of extra stress and burden.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. Because the tension never seems to go away. And the burden on you to speak up and always be constantly trying to decide, do I choose my health and well-being right now, or do I speak up and go through whatever, you know, take the chance? It's now this time. What do I do in this moment? It's a constant battle of choice. And you know, some things that are really helpful is having groups of people, community around you that is supportive, so that when you don't have the energy to speak up, to be the person, that you can share that load with someone else, or they do the thing while you rest and restore yourself. But you have to be able to be vulnerable enough to build that community and recognize you cannot, not one of us can move the needle alone. We cannot. Not for ourselves, not for each other, not for generations. No, we just cannot.
Yeah, you're absolutely right on that. And
Mm.
in line with your message, given the amazing work you've done, the supervision, the leadership group, we're here to talk about bringing identity in the workplace.
Mhm.
Tell me how you have navigated that ongoing tension while also being able to bring your identity in the workplace.
One thing that does come to mind is like in having these conversations, you have a group of people on one side who will say, she said all that about being navigating the welfare system, or all what all the childhood stuff, and what does that have to do with being a clinical leader? What does that have to be do with being a therapist? None of that. You don't even have to talk about that stuff in therapy. No, I don't have to talk about that stuff as a therapist. But all of those experiences, all of who I am, absolutely affects who I am and what I bring to the therapeutic space. It affects who I am as a leader. It affects my team, the leader I want to become, how I can mentor them into becoming inclusive leaders. So if I don't know who I am and I'm not in touch with my identities, my experiences, if I'm not aware of how I can use strategic vulnerability to create opportunities for collective impact, then I won't be able to do this work. I won't be those days of rigidity that we learn through our psychology programs. That does not allow us to do the depth of work needed to reach the masses. It doesn't. It doesn't. It keeps us stuck. So I think that we have to learn how to bring our identities into the work and all of the intersections of the identities that exist. Because what we are seeing that there's so many intersections, and until we become open enough, people with the most intersections of identities will continue to have the most to navigate.
Because you've gone through it and you're currently in leadership positions, do you have any tips for folks that are trying to navigate, trying to be a leader, also trying to connect with that identity, the historical identity, the intersectional identities? Do you have any tips for them?
I would say start, there's an identity wheel on every corner of the internet. So you can always, use the identity wheel. If you want to Google one, I'm always happy to share one too. But that is a really easy source to like just sort of start putting your identities in a circle, and it gives you definitions of what those identities, how you define the different categories of identities. That is a really great exercise to do. And that's for people who do groups and want to introduce identity work into their work. I would start with an identity wheel with each exercise. And that helps you to explore keeping a list. So one of the things I learned along the way is keeping a brag sheet. So just keeping a list of your accomplishments, the things that you have done from small to largest, because sometimes our external world does get so loud and it does create that invisibility that we were talking about earlier. And you need to be able to put through something that kind of, put a little oomph back in, in your in yourself, So nothing does that like being able to flip back through, like, wait a minute, it's a little reminder. You
Yeah.
did that.
Yeah,
And you
you
did
did
that.
that.
Yeah, you did that.
And I
And
think that's a
so
powerful message because you're saying these are the gifts you bring to the organizations. And I think that gets lost oftentimes. Can you elaborate more on that?
absolutely. For so like we have to remember when we come into these organizations, any organization, just like any relationship you go into with someone else, you are choosing to bring what you bring into it. And it's all of the gifts, all of the skills, all of your experiences, they belong to you. They're yours. And you are sharing them, gifting them to the organization. So that is the value you bring to the organization. So there is shared value. That organization is sharing some value with you. You're sharing some value with them because your values align. When those values no longer align, you then get to make choices.
Wow,
And
what a beautiful way to put this. And there's empowerment in framing
yeah,
it the way you just did.
absolutely, absolutely. Because we can forget, that we're bringing our gifts to the table, and loyalty can keep us trapped in situations where we feel like, I've given everything and everything I have belongs to this space. But there is a bigger table with seats already prepared with your name on them. And if you do not pack your bags with your gifts, skills, and all of that love and empathy that you can take, you'll be trapped at a table where they didn't even make a seat for you. You're standing at the door looking and peeping into a window when there's another place with a table with your name on chairs.
Oh, yeah, the missed opportunity. Got to take
Yeah.
that. So, in your career as a person of color, what were some challenges that you faced and overcame that you would be willing to share?
Sometimes it's hard to know because I've been a person of color all my life, so it's hard to pick out which challenges are challenges because I'm a person and which challenges are challenges because I'm a person of color. But because I don't get to separate them ever at all, my biggest challenge that I've had to navigate is prioritizing my own self care, my health, and my wellness because I have found that this need to overproduce and sprinkle that with extra helping of perfection and at all times and at all costs, even if it meant my own well-being. And so having to learn what it looked like to be aware of my nervous system and somatic symptoms, and when I was really, really, really coming up on the brick wall, and not only just seeing it, but saying something, doing something different, and creating different habits and setting boundaries, that is an ongoing challenge. And it's one that I hear often is that feeling a need to overproduce, please, perfection, always showing up for others. It's just really difficult. And those are the things that make it hard to pack up your gift and to kind of sort of decide to preserve yourself within any space.
It's an ongoing challenge. In many ways, it's not one of those things where you overcome completely. You
Oh
have
no.
to, you're faced with it all the time. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So that is definitely one of the biggest challenges. And I do challenge it because I attribute that to being a Black woman in leadership and also being a Black woman in leadership in the field of behavioral health because you have this unique experience of constantly holding space for clients, for your team, for leaders is what you do, and then you have family and all of the other hats that we wear. So it's I would say another challenge is being able to accept some of the growth areas of people around you in like while they are still on their journey and being open to that rather than like having a open shut no. I think as a DEIB practitioner, that has been a growth area. It's just sort of accepting that people are on different journeys at all times on their own inclusivity journey and what that looks like for them, how what their understanding of allyship is. And I have to decide how I'm going to navigate around that.
There's a lot of fluidity in thinking about people's flow and journey as they're navigating the space. My
Right.
journey looks this way. And then you have to decide as a BIPOC
I
provider, where
yeah.
do I fit? How do I want to interact with that space? This idea of gift and identity. We are celebrating Black History Month.
Mhm.
What does that mean for you?
So much. I think that it gives me this opportunity to like give homage to black all of the black people that have come before me, the black people that have done such amazing work in mental health before me, the ones that have pioneered and busted through doors. I mean, just so I can be on a podcast and talk about this out loud, that we really one it just means we get to give homage to where we've come, how far we've come, and then it gives me so much hope to be able to look forward. I think that when we can look forward to generations, I literally see like this lines and lines and lines of beautiful like black people in their brilliance and shining And it's all because of the work that we get to do right now and today. And that's why it's so important that that we do stay diligent and rest and have Black joy and create memories and love on each other and, teach them what they should ask for and like be brave ourselves because, we can teach bravery and show bravery. It gives us an opportunity to be exciting. And then it is also Black History Month is always a reminder to me to remind people that it should not just be a month that we are doing this work.
I couldn't agree more. It shouldn't be a month thing.
No, I stopped being Black March 1st.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. Of all the work that you're doing, how do we support you? What would you like our listeners
Mm.
to know?
For the listeners, what I would like them to know is that each listener, regardless of your identity, intersections of identities, you you are included. You are included in this collective impact. You are included in this community of people that has an opportunity to do something different, to say something different, to be bold, be brave, to save yourself. You don't always have to save somebody else. You get the rest because you're not doing the work alone. So don't ever feel like your invisibility has created this isolated place where you are having to do the work alone, so much so that you run into the brick wall. You know, you have to preserve your gifts for the generations to come.
There's so much care in that message, so much
Yeah.
compassion and care. Yeah, yeah. Samantha, any final thoughts?
I'm excited to have been able to just share in this conversation. And so my hope is that I am continuing to be able to be brave and have more of these conversations, be vulnerable. So those are my last things is that I really do appreciate this platform.
Wow. Samantha, thank you so much for your courage. Thank you so much for your leadership. Everything that you do. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for what you're doing.
If you like what you've heard, please share and subscribe to our podcast, People of Color in Psychology. Other ways to support us include registering for continuing education courses or making a one-time donation on the Multicultural Counseling Institute's website. We value your input and appreciate your continued support. You can send us an email, a message on LinkedIn, or send a voice message on our website. Until next time, I am your host, Jack Sun.